Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Emancipation Reflections, Readings and Workshop with the African American Writers Alliance. This presentation is currently being recorded, so please be aware of that. And if you are in our Zoom space and prefer not to be on camera, just go ahead and put that little bar over your camera. And we also ask everyone in our Zoom space to please mute your microphones during this event. And we will be opening up microphones later during our workshop and Q&A. This presentation, as I mentioned, is being recorded, and we are so thankful to Langston Seattle and Minerva Labs for inviting the African American Writers Alliance to be a part of We Out Here Seattle 2021. My name is Marianne Osborne, and I'm one of the members of the African American Writers Alliance. The African American Writers Alliance, or AWA, as we like to call ourselves, is a diverse and dynamic collective of writers of African descent. We provide an informal and supportive forum for new and published writers. Our stories, triumphs, tragedies, and whatever is within and between the two are the history of African Americans. This program tonight will be live streaming to the Langston Seattle Facebook page, YouTube pages, Minerva Labs YouTube, South Seattle Emerald Facebook page, and the We Out Here website. Y'all got to check out that website. There's lots of great things happening throughout the week and even later on this evening. In honor and celebration of Juneteenth, we will be reading slave narratives that our members have researched. And these narratives have been gathered from various libraries, collections, and also from personal family histories. After our readings, we invite you to join us for a writing workshop. We ask that you just have a pen and paper ready, or maybe you'll be writing on your computer or some other device. We encourage everyone to write. It doesn't matter whether you feel like I'm not a writer or I don't have anything to say. It's just a time to sit and reflect on anything you heard or anything you're thinking about during this time of Juneteenth, especially now that it's a national holiday. We do want to say that while this is an all ages event, please note that some of our readings contain contain graphic images and language, including the word nigger, as used in a historic context. So just please be aware of that. Once again, if you're in the Zoom space, welcome. We look forward to getting to know you. If you're out on YouTube or some other, we're gonna try and figure out if we can get some of your questions directly to us if you have any. Thank you again. And we are going to start with our first reader this evening, Helen Collier, and hopefully we will also have another reader from AWA joining us soon, Dr. Georgia McDade. But Helen, do you mind starting us off this evening? And thank you so much.
Good evening. I'm honored to be here celebrating the freedom of my people enslaved in this country. My name is Helen Collier. I am a Black American storyteller. While I write in many genres, my passion is writing stories about my people in this country and how we have learned to survive. It is shocking to think many writers in this country have written books leaving out the people who have taken care of the most basic needs of their lives. The telling of those stories is always foremost on my mind. You can't imagine how shocked I was to learn about 15 years ago that I had an elderly cousin named Viola Henderson who lived in Maywood, Illinois, who lives with my great-grandmother when she was a young girl. Hattie Rose Crittenden, my great-grandmother, was born a slave in Clayton Parish, Louisiana. She jumped the broom with George Crittenden. She had 9 children, some of which was born in slavery, but were freed along with their slave parents after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed by President Lincoln. Hattie Rose, according to my cousin, was of average height, with long white hair that hung down her back. It must have been because she was said to have been a full-blooded Cherokee Native American living in slavery with my African great-grandfather. My cousin Viola seemed to have known my great-grandmother very well, even though she was an old woman when my cousin took care of her. She stated that Hattie Rose never seemed to realize she was free and continued to call the white man who owned the land where they lived massa, a term used for slave owners during slavery. My grandmother, Roberta Crittenden, must have lived her early life as a slave and learned a lot from my great-grandmother, because when my mother was very young, she was bit by a rattlesnake pilot. And my grandmother, she stated, took a chicken, slit its throat, then cut her leg below her knee and laid the bleeding chicken next to it. Her blood from that cut turned green. The doctor told my grandmother it saved her child's life. My grandmother, Roberta, Viola told me, always referred to my great-grandmother as Mammy, a term slave children used to refer to their mothers during slavery. I now realize that much of my grandmother's life was influenced by my great-grandmother's teachings, as she learned as a Native American, some of which she passed on to my mother. Viola also shared that in the early days of freedom, the freed slaves were treated as though they were still slaves by the white people. It was as though, she recalled, the slaves had simply gone from one form of slavery to another form of slavery. She mentioned the time a male relative had been asked to come to see a white man about some land he owned. When he arrived there, the man got him drunk and had him sign over his land to him. Since there was no legal remedies for freed slaves, they had no protections against wrongs done to them. What I never knew was that domino was a game taught to the free slaves by slaves that came here to this country from Jamaica, Puerto Rico, and other islands. It gave them their first introduction to learning how to count because of the numbers 5, 10, 15, etc. That was required in that game. It helped them understand counting numbers. They eventually learned enough math to stop the practice of sharecropping owners cheating them out of their money at the end of the year. Domino is a game still loved by most Southern people in that part of the South. I watched my aunts and uncles play the game for years. I just never knew the deeper meaning of it and how it shaped their lives, learning to overcome the obstacles, surviving in a society that was bent on destroying them. Another interesting occurrence was their learning of Pig Latin that was said to have been brought to America by free slaves from Cuba and other islands where enslaved people had lived. The white people thought they were speaking bad English, but the free slaves used that language to mask the words they need to speak without their adversaries' awareness. It kept them alive many times while living under the control of the very people who had fought the Revolutionary War to win their freedom, but never thought it wrong to enslave others. There is no greater tragedy than when a man's life is owned by another. Juneteenth is the day we celebrate the freedom of our ancestors from their tragic lives of slavery in this country. When I think about my cousin Viola, Hattie Rose, my great-grandmother, Roberta, my grandmother, and my mother, Susie Pearl, I realize they all gave their lives to bring to pass the coming of this day they never thought possible. Thank you. Next up is Gaylord Saunderson.
Hello, my name is Gaylord Saunderson. I'm happy to introduce myself as a Vers Libre poet, an avid hiker, and fair weather cyclist. Kathleen, my wife, Sabra, my cat, Cheyenne, my dog, and I live in Burien. I write poems, essays, lighthearted anecdotes reflecting how humans live among themselves and nature. I'm reading the slave narrative of James Lucas, ex-slave of Jefferson Davis, with a commentary about his story at the end. I recollect a heap about slavery times. Sharecropping wasn't much different from slavery. We just changed a master for a boss. I was born in October 11, 1833. My mammy sure was healthy. Her mammy come over to this country in a big ship. Folks couldn't understand a word she said. It was some sort of gibberish they call gula talk. I belonged to Master Withers from the north, and he didn't have no wife. Masters without wife was the devil. My next master was President Jefferson Davis himself. He was no president then. Slaves didn't know what to expect from freedom, but a lot of them hoped they would be freed and kept by the government. They didn't know just exactly what freedom meant. Folks that never been freed and rightly know the feeling of being free. They don't know the meaning. I had a wife and 2 children when the war broke out. The Yankees put me on a gunboat. Next day made me dig a canal at Vicksburg. While us was bulldogging Vicksburg in the front, a Yankee army slipped in behind the rebels. I was on hand when General Lee handed his sword to General Grant. I seen him stick his sword in the ground. It sure was terrible times. More people crippled and dead. I seen them even saw off legs with hacksaw. Then I was put to burying Yankee soldiers. I stripped the dead of their money. I got a big roll of folded money. My folks didn't have no money but that worthless kind. I grabbed some of it and throwed it in the fire. Then I give my daddy a greenback and told him what it was. After the war, the slaves were worse off than when they had masters. They caught diseases and died by hundreds, just like flies. There ain't no place for them to go, no bed to sleep on, and no roof over their heads. The Ku Kluxes were the devil. The niggers sure was scared of them, but they were more after the carpetbaggers than the niggers. I remember when Master Lincoln got killed and how all the flags hung at half-mast. The North went worried with and blamed the killing on Master Davis. I guess slavery was wrong. I remember us had some mighty good times in those days. You worked and knowed you'd be fed. In the middle of the day, us rested and waited until the horn blew to go back to the fields. Slaves didn't have nothing terrible to worry about if and they acted right. In slavery time, when you got sick, a white doctor would pay to get you well. Now you get some no-count medicine. You're afraid to go to the hospital because doctors might cut your stomach. When white folks told us we was free, the soldiers turned us loose like animals with nothing. They had no business to set us free like that. They give me land, but 'twan't no count in low swampy bios. 'Twan't yours land to keep less than you lived on it, cleared it, drained it, and put a house on it. I was 5 feet, 5 inches tall. I used to weigh 150 pounds, but this old carcass of mine done lost 50 pounds of meat. Nowadays, I have a heap of misery in my knee. During the war, I got a musket ball in my hip and it hurts me worse. Now my commentary. Of Jim's important narrative, A point he made is, we just changed a master for a boss. Today we have wage slavery. Our working class has been schooled to quest for a job. Often heard is, go to school and get a good job. Better work is available after completing college. Seldom taught are entrepreneur skills, and exposure of entrepreneurship is limited. Mentoring and experience are not included in most curriculum. And the next person after me, Marianne, I forgot who that was.
That's okay. After Gaylord is Leoma.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leoma James. I write poems and short stories centered around the Black experience, and I'm currently working on publishing my first novel called No Blame, No Shame, No Guilt. In honor of Juneteenth, I found a reading from the Library of Congress from the day that former enslaved people found out about their freedom. I found a reading by a woman by the name of Mary Anderson, who is 86 years old. Well, she was 86 years old at the time of this reading, from Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Mary Anderson. I was born on a plantation near Frankenton, Wake County, May 10th, 1851. I was a slave belonging to Sam Brody, who owned the plantation at this place. And my missus' name was Evelyn. My father was Alfred Brody, and my mother was Bertha Brody. The war began there. There were stories of, when the war began, there were stories of fights and freedom. The news went from plantation to plantation while the slaves acted natural and some even more polite than usual. They prayed for freedom. Then one day I heard something that sounded like thunder, and missus and masters began to walk around and act queer. The grown slaves were whispering to each other. Sometimes they gathered in little gangs in the grove. Next day I heard it again. Boom, boom, boom. I went and asked missus, is it going to rain? She said, Mary, go to the ice house and bring some pickles and preserves. I went and got them. She ate a little and gave me some. Then she said, you run along and play. In a day or two, everybody on the plantation seemed to be disturbed, and master and missus were crying. Master ordered all the slaves to come to the great house at 9 o'clock. Nobody was working, and slaves were working over the grove and walking over the grove in every direction. At 9 o'clock, all the slaves gathered at the great house, and master and missus came out on the porch and stood side by side. You could hear a pin drop. Everything was so silent. Then master said, good morning, and missus said, good morning, children. They were both crying. Then master said, men, women, and children, you are free. You are no longer my slaves. The Yankees will soon be here. Master and missus then went into the house, got 2 large armchairs, and put them on the porch facing the avenue, and sat down side by side and remained there watching. In about an hour, there was one of the blackest sounds coming up the avenue from the road. It was the Yankee soldiers. Then finally, fields from miles to miles, from avenue and road to road, the Yankee soldiers came to master's house in the main road and spread over a mile square to the grove. The mountain men dismounted. The footmen stacked their shining guns and began to build fires and cook. They called the slaves, saying, you are free, slaves. The slaves were whooping and laughing and acting as if they were crazy. Yankee soldiers were shaking hands with the Negroes and calling them by their name. It was the first time I had ever heard a white man call us by name. Sam, Dina, Sarah, asking them questions, actually asking, interested in their lives. They asked at the door to the smokehouse and got all the hams. They went to the ice house and got several barrels of brandy, and such a time. I will never forget this day. The Negroes and the Yankees were cooking and eating together. The Yankees told them to come and join them. They were free. Master and missus sat on the porch, and they were so humble. No Yankee bothered anything in the great house. The slaves were awfully excited. My biggest takeaway from this were that the slaves were praying for freedom, and that when the slave owners had to give up their right to own slaves, they cried. I wrote a poem And this is my reflection from this piece. It's called The Seed. You think it's dead, but the seed is still planted. You think it's done, but the roots are still lasting, strong, blasting, unreluctant to move, earth shaking, groundbreaking when we walk into a room. Stop telling me to forget when it's inside of me like a baby in the womb. We don't think we're at war, but that's just how we lose. Keep breathing, keep hoping, keep fighting, keep waiting for a better day. Well, that's what they say, even though it's raining every day. Even when the sun's out, we never get a break. You lie and cheat and misbehave, lock us behind bars and put us in the grave. For what though? Are you afraid that if we know just who we are, we could find freedom just by looking at a star? Call me a minority because you feel small. Shoot Brianna in her sleep when you're the cop. The only one I know who could do that. Any other person make a move like that and we'd be behind the bars that you protect, but you want us to forget. I feel the same pain as my grandmother because my mother was inside of her. And I was there inside of her eggs. I felt everything, every tear, every scream, every emotion that you bring. And you ask me why I'm angry like you haven't done a thing. I didn't break it, but now you want me to fix it. But you have to correct that. You have to acknowledge what you've been taught and forget that. You have to change the system that enables you and rebuke that. Even when you feel so much shame that it consumes you, you have to know you're wrong and be the change you believe in. If you could go back and tell your grandfather he was wrong, dial up your time machine and change it all. Challenge your privilege and support the fight. Even if you got less than what you got at birthright, would you, could you challenge yourself, stand up to your family and climb the ladder? Or are you just another white girl yelling Black Lives Matter, not showing me my Black life matters? You only want us when we dribble a ball and run faster, chuck and jive, smile for your camera as we comply, but it's all a lie. My ancestors live inside of me because the seed's been planted, and they won't stop until our wish has been granted. The hate you give won't slow me down. The concrete rose straight from the ground. And where we cry, the water flows, infinite rivers straight from the soul. I am birthed from the revolution that gives us oil, red for the blood, black for my skin, and green for the soil. Thank you. I would now like to call up Mr. Isom Taylor.
Thank you, Leoma. My name is Isom Taylor, and I write under the pen name Royat Mosi. I am a descendant of African slaves. 5 generations back can be traced on both sides to the 1860 census, where my forefathers and foreparents were listed as slaves. Harriet Ann Jacobs, ex-slave. My commentary is from an excerpt of incidents in the life of a slave girl written by herself, Harriet Ann Jacobs, using the pseudonym Linda Brent. Miss Jacobs was born in some references the year of 1813 into plantation life and owned by Delilah Horningblow, whose family owned a local tavern in Eddington, North Carolina. Miss Jacobs died on March 6, 1897, at the age of 84 in Washington, D.C., which is her final resting place at Mount Auburn Cemetery. Other than slavery nanny professional and dedicated mother, Miss Jacobs' occupation was a 7-year hider, a runaway property, an abolition advocate who was a writer of a notable autobiography. I've selected from her 3rd chapter, The Slave's New Year's Day, my excerpt. Then comes New Year's Eve, and they gather together with all their littles, or more properly speaking, their little nothings, and wait anxiously for the day. At the appointed hour, the grounds are thronged with men and women and children waiting like criminals to be heard and hear their doom pronounced. The slave is sure to know who is the most humane or cruel master within 40 miles of him. It is easy to find out on that day who clothes and feeds their slaves well. for he is surrounded by a crowd begging, "Please, Master, hire me this year. I will work hard, Master." After those for hire are disposed of, those for sale are called up. Oh, you happy free women. Contrast your New Year's Day with that of the poor bondwoman. With you, it is a pleasant season, and the light of day is blessed. Friendly wishes meet you everywhere, and gifts are showered upon you. Even the hearts that have been estranged from you are softened, and the lips echo back Happy New Year's. Children bring their little offerings and raise their rosy lips for a caress. They are your own, and no hand but that of death can take them from you. But the slave mother, New Year's Day comes with peculiar sorrow. She sits on her cold floor, watching the children who may all be torn from her the next morning, and often does she wish that she and they may die before day dawn. She may be an ignorant creature, degraded by the system that brutalized her from childhood, but she has a mother's instinct and is capable of feeling a mother's agony. On one of these sale days, I saw a mother lead 7 children into the auction block. She knew that some of them would be taken. They took them all. The children were sold to a slave trader, and the mother was bought by a man in her own town. Before night, her children were all far away. She begged the trader to tell where he intended to take them. This he refused to do. How could he, when he knew he would sell them one by one, wherever he could command the highest price? I met that mother in the streets, and her wild, haggard face lives today in my mind. She wrung her hands in anguish and exclaimed, "Gone, all gone. Why don't God kill me too?" I had no words wherewith to comfort her. My commentary about this excerpt is that Miss Jacobs deals with a double bondage suffered by enslaved Black women. The harsh reality hit us right between the eye as opposed to the treatment of slaves without wounds. Mothers for all of creation have instinctively cared for, protected, and loved their children. But Miss Jacob magnified the fact that enslaved women would rather die than have their children taken, and some did, killing both themselves and their offspring. Miss Jacob examined both the horrible slave challenges and the sexual abuse by Black female slaves and their efforts to have ownership of their very motherhood and to protect the children that they love. She confronts white women of the North with their fine hats and splendid dresses who don't seem to be disturbed at all by the evils of slavery with hard and ugly facts. She poses the notion of the knowledge of the fact that their children might be sold away at any time. She makes a deep emotional appeal directly to their humanity as she sought to increase their knowledge and move their minds in the struggle against the institution of slavery. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce another one of our queens, Lady J.
Lady J. All right. Oh, Isom, that's so hard. As a mother hearing that, so difficult. Anyone that's a mother or sister or daughter, knowing that your children or siblings might be sold off, is so hard. The person I chose is a little bit about me: playwright, spoken word artist. Oh, and I'm a playwright because of Marianne Osborne. So I want to just throw that out there. a spoken word artist, and I perform at a wide variety of venues, places, locations, and da 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 da. But what's important right now are these slave narratives, not me. And so I selected Sarah. It's either Gooter or Gooter. And as soon as I saw she was 121 years old when she was interviewed, I was like, okay, this is the one, this is the one. But now I looked at the excerpt of her slave narrative and I'm like, okay, I'm getting ready to try to read this. I'm getting ready to try and read it in her voice. I don't know if that's going to work in the caption, but here we go. This is what she had to say in like many of these narratives. It just touches my heart. This really touches my heart. So here we go, trying in her voice. I remember the time when my mammy was alive. I was a small child. Often they done took her to the Winds Creek. All us children were playing in the yard one night, just a running and a playing like steering wheel. All of a sudden, Mammy come to the door all excited. Come in here, dear Minnie, she say. Just look up at what is happening. And bless your life, honey. The stars were falling, just like rain. Mammy was troubled, scared. But when we chilling, we weren't afraid. No, we weren't afraid. But Mammy, she said every time a star falls, somebody gonna die. Look, a lot of folks gonna die. From the look of them there stars, everything was just a brighter day. You could have picked a pin up. You know the stars don't shine as bright as they did back then. I wonder why they don't. They just don't shine as bright. Going long before they took my one long before they took my mammy away. I was left for alone. Just to say that part right there. A small child being left alone, just, I was kind of like, Leoma, it almost brings you to tears, And so as a result, I wrote something thinking about those children and thinking about the mother and thinking about those stars. And it was really in 1833 that it was spectacular. I want you to hear this. Let's start my piece. Freedom feels like stars raining grace. If I can't be free, let it rain. Let it rain from stratus and cumulus clouds. Let it pour from the heavens above, washing, drenching me to the bone. If I can't be free. If I can't be free, let lightning strike, splitting the air like flogging whips, 40 vertical lashes, cutting into rock solid hearts, immune, deaf to grace. If I can't be free. If I can't be free, let thunder roar with the power of a mighty, ferocious lion, grumbling, growling, dominance through the galaxy. intimidation, paralyzing men with innocent blood, staining guilty hands. If I can't be free, if I can't be free, let my magnetic energy shake the earth. Let it shake the earth to its core. Rolling, rumbling, rattling windows, sounding car alarms, and crumbling concrete. Let buildings fall as men run to the hills seeking refuge, trembling in fear. If I can't be free, let my tears raise sea levels, a tropical cyclone stirring up ocean waves, filling lakes, rivers, and streams until they rise above banks, walls, and sandbags, levees breaking, destroying super and mega yachts, villages and cities alike. If I can't be free, let the most spectacular stars rain grace. Darting, dashing, bright, radiant, glowing as fireballs traveling across skies, showering me with a beautiful sight beyond description as people faint, believing the world would end, unable to comprehend the stars. The stars are like freedom, a sign, a godsend. Thank you so much. In poem. And I introduce you to the phenomenal Marianne Osborne.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you. My name is Marianne Osborne, and I write short stories, young adult fantasy fiction, historical narratives, songs, short plays, like Jay, wherever the mood takes me. The narrative I'd like to read was recorded by the Works Project Administration, the WPA, sometime between 1936 and 1938 with Lydia Jefferson. Miss Jefferson was 86 years old and living in Houston, Texas at the time this narrative was recorded. She was born into slavery on a plantation in Louisiana. And Miss Jefferson and her twin sister, Lucy, were raised in their master's house because their mother, Judy Bates, died at their birth. She died as the result of a whipping she had received at the hands of a nigger driver a few days before Lydia and Lucy were born. Like Jay, I will also use the language of Miss Jefferson. And here we go. Lord have mercy. If and I gets to talking about times for the war, I don't know most when to stop. Everything just seems quiet and peaceful now. And that's what God loves, peace. But I see it different. Yes, sir, a heap of different. What I tells you is just what I've been told and what I sees myself. And I tells just the truth. Pappy's name was Bartless Bates and was a free-born man from the foreign country, but I just don't remember where he from. Now he tell me when I was little, how come he's a slave? He say when he's a young man, he work on a boat what comes to New Orleans, and he leaves the boat like the rest of the sailors do, and comes into town to do a little courting. And the law picks him up and sells him to some nigger traders, will carry him away and then sell him to old Massa Willis Prescott. Mama belonged to old Massa Willis too. And Pappy say old Massa marry him legal. And that's how come us. About the first thing I remembered is till this day was Pappy telling me to be obedient and do what the white folks tell me to. That's one reason no one ever gave me a lick. Oh, them was black times, sure enough. The cruelest treatment what some of the slaves got, that's I seen with my own eyes, was awful. I had seen the overseer make men and women too pull off their clothes, and they would find the largest ant bed they could find and make them sit naked in it. And the overseer always stripped the men and the women naked in the field, and they whip them. For a woman, what is pregnant, they dig a hole in the ground and they lay her over the hole and they whip her. That's the way they did my mama. One day I hear Massa Ben tell the overseers to put the slaves to load in the wagons because we're moving to Texas on account of the Yankees was coming. But I know we never reach Texas because we stop at the Piney Woods plantation, which is just before you reach Texas. Now, I was about 14 years old and Pappy had died 2 days before. And Massa Aaron come up and say, Ben, don't you know you can't hold them no longer? They ought to be free 2 days ago. In the narrative, Miss Jefferson goes on to say that she returned to Louisiana with most of the other slaves to work back at the old plantation because, as Isom mentioned, there was nowhere else to go. Here's how she ends her narrative. Matt was my husband, died in 1912, and I come to Texas to live with my daughter. Yes, sir, the freedom, sunshine, and the black times all gone. Praise the Lord, it's quiet and peaceful like now. And that's what God loves, peace. Here's my expression and response. It's March 2017, and I'm on vacation in New Orleans, Louisiana. Vacation. See, vacations get complicated, and Louisiana is a complicated state. During the Civil War, part of the state was fighting for the Confederacy, and a small part was fighting for the Union. And there were plenty of slaves and plantations throughout the state. Well, that morning, my husband and I set off for the Whitney Plantation in Elgard, Louisiana, about an hour away from New Orleans. The Whitney Plantation is the only museum in Louisiana with an exclusive focus on the lives of enslaved people. I know, we're on vacation, and I want to go visit a plantation dedicated to enslaved people. It's complicated, but I had to learn more about this history, our shared history, my history. So my husband and I got there early, and we were part of the first group to go on the tour of the plantation in that morning. Our guide was a local woman whose ancestors had been slaves on that same plantation. That's a hard thing to wrap your mind on. It's complicated. What I heard that day from that guide makes me think more about Miss Jefferson's story when I read it today. In her narrative, she says, there wasn't any purity for the young girls in the slave quarters because the overseer was always sending for the Negro girls to be with him, and some girl was always finding a baby for him. At the Whitney Plantation, there is a memorial to the horror and sexual exploitation of those children, young girls and women. We see you and we honor you all. Would Miss Jefferson's name be on the Alice Gwendolyn Midlow Hall, a slave memorial dedicated to over 100,000 enslaved people in Louisiana? We see you and we honor you all. Would she have heard of all the slave rebellions taking place from plantation to plantation along that Mississippi River? We see you and honor you all. I think of all the slaves of that plantation and so many others. I think about my enslaved ancestors from Georgia to South Carolina, Barbados and beyond. I think about Miss Jefferson and her perseverance, her ability to survive, and her belief in the power of peace. Yes, Miss Jefferson, the freedom, sunshine, but the hard times are not all gone. I hope we get that quiet and peace soon, the same kind you wished for over 100 years ago. But you see, it's complicated. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our final reader for the evening, Dr. Georgia McDade. Welcome, Georgia, and she's going to tell us a little bit about the Juneteenth holiday and some other reflections.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank everybody for showing up. I know you've been enlightened by listening to these stories. Marianne's was from the recorded during the Works Progress Administration, and depending on your source of information, there are as many as 6,000 narratives, but only about 150 have been printed. And you really can find some that talk about how happy everybody was. And of course, you can find some that go to the extreme, but please take the time to look at some of them. Now, I hope you remember these narratives. I hope you remember Juneteenth, 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 Juneteenth. Keep saying it. Last year, 2 persons asked me, when was it? Early in the week, another person asked me, when was it? When is Juneteenth? Yesterday, someone told me it was June 17th. So I want to make sure everybody knows that it is June 19th. Now, I have a little help. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. 19 is the last teen, okay? So remember, Juneteenth is the last teen. And another something, not you, but some people get wrong, is to believe that when the word got to Galveston, June 19th, 1865, all enslaved people were free. That is not true. That is not true. If you look at the Emancipation Proclamation, there's a little part in there that says rebellious. The states that were rebellious could surrender, or their slaves were automatically free. Now remember, this is June 1865, but anyone who happened to be enslaved and not in one of those 11 Confederate states, you know, none of them surrendered as such. But anybody, if you were in New York, Kentucky, Connecticut, any of those states, and everybody needs to know that there were slaves all over. The majority of the slaves were in the South, but that was not where all of the slaves were. But if you happen not to be in one of those Confederate states, you were not free. Slavery was ended officially, and I love saying officially, because that's what it was, but it was ended officially with the 13th Amendment, and that was not ratified until December 31st, 1865. June 19th is Juneteenth. June 19th, June 10th. Juneteenth is not the day that all enslaved people were free. Thank you so very much. And now we go back to that wonder of wonders, Jay Ware. She's told you a little about herself. It was her idea for the workshops. So now she is going to tell you what is expected of all of us. Thank you so much for coming. Jay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Georgia McDade. Dr. Georgia Stewart McDade. So I always love when you explain how people can recall and remember Juneteenth. It's like write it on a chalkboard. It's wonderful. Okay, so now it's time for our workshop. So you have heard some incredible slave narratives. Sad, really. Most of them were very, very sad. Just really hard when you're a caring, thoughtful, considerate, sensitive person. It's just really hard to hear about anyone's suffering. But as we focus on these slave narratives of Africans who were taken by force off their continent and brought by force to this country to slave away to build this country, and the anguish and the agony and the suffering they endured sometimes is beyond our ability to comprehend. And we are here today. We are here today. Here's your takeaway. You need to write. We implore you, we encourage you to write. And you're thinking about these slaves and what they were going through, not able to see the next week, any type of freedom, the next month, any type of freedom, the next year. You are going to write to them and tell them, this is what has happened. This is what has occurred because of your suffering, because of your blood, because of your sacrifice. We are here today, and this is what it looks like. And we thank you. This is Juneteenth, and we thank you. This is Black History Month, and we thank you. Many leaders have come and gone, but these leaders, as a result, like Martin Luther King and so many others, have allowed us to have freedoms that you could not imagine, and you're going to write and give them hope. Give them hope. So normally we would break out into rooms, but because of the small number of participants, we're just gonna all stay in the main room. And the writing prompt is for you to write. Just remember, let them know a change is gonna come. Let them know a change is gonna come. Thank you so much. And I'd like to turn this over to Isom. Isom Taylor.
Well, we want to spend the time and we will come back after you write, but we do want to say thank you for just listening in. But more importantly, as you spend this time, you can feel free to focus for how long of a period is it, Marianne? 15 minutes, 5?
Yeah, let's do about 12 minutes. So we have time to 12 minutes. And then we put the prompt in the chat for those of you who can see it. What do you think, Isom, 12?
That would work well. So we'll take 12 minutes and we'll come back and have a sharing. During that time, feel free to mute yourself. And if you like, cross out your video. And we're starting now.
All right, everyone, I know you're still writing. We have about 2 more minutes. 2 more minutes. Thank you. All right, as people start opening their cameras, if you'd like to participate, and Isom will help us with this part of the workshop. Thanks, Isom.
Again, we welcome everybody back. We'll give you just a few seconds to get your camera and unmute your mic. And our preference for this exercise would be if you do elect to share that you unmute. And we do want to hear from you about what would you say to those ex-slaves on Juneteenth? What are your words of hope? And what did you include in what you want them to know about Juneteenth and its impact today and their sacrifices from the past? Are there any volunteers who would like to start off with their sharing?
I have an answer, but I would like one of our guests to be first if possible. We go until 6:30, right?
We are scheduled to go until 6.
Oh, okay. I just want to hear as much as we can.
Okay, Georgia, we'll see what spillover of time we can do.
Okay.
If anyone would like to read, just please put your hand up or put it in the chat that you would like to, and Isom can call on you. Look forward to hearing from you. Or if you didn't write something, but you have some reflections, you just want to share about something we've read or about Juneteenth becoming a national holiday, feel free to share that also.
I'll get us started. Maybe after I say something, then people will say, yeah, no, I don't buy it. But I did. I looked at your question. Now I have to hope I can read my writing. If I were writing to some of these people, I would say, you would think Abraham Lincoln was on our side. The truth is, Mr. Lincoln wanted to save the Union. I hate to think where we would be had he thought it necessary to continue slavery to save the Union. But Lincoln was a smart man, and he quoted Jesus when he said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." Now, in 1865, we got the 13th Amendment, and that one abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment came in 68, and that one made us citizens. And get this, the 15th one gave us the right to vote. And here we are in 2021, still fighting for that right to vote. You need to know that you have just begun to fight. It was terrible before, but now it will be terrible in different ways. So despite the passage of these laws, these bills, the federal government did not see us as the humans we were. There was the Dred Scott decision in 1857, which said, in effect, that slavery was slavery anywhere, because if you were in a slave state and you were taken to a free state, you were not free. You still belonged to the person who took you there. And then in 1896, we got Plessy versus Ferguson, and your government told you, or should I say, will tell you, that separate is equal. Oh, and it will take years to get rid of that separate but equal ruling. There was Reconstruction, and many of us had many hopes at that time, but it only lasted 14 years, from 1863 to 1877. So many of the problems that you faced, we face in a different way today than then. But you need to know that you will not have an easy road to hoe as a freed person. Okay. That's all.
Thank you, Georgia.
Mhm.
Georgia just did some
Georgia,
history on us.
Is there someone else that would just like to share any reflection or thoughts, even some of our writers?
I can share. I can share, if you don't mind. Do you hear me? Isom? Okay.
Go ahead, Helen. I can hear you. We can
All right,
hear
thank
you.
They found the most horrific, unimaginable ways to destroy our lives. There was no mercy, no love, not even care of the pain we bore would forever stain our hearts and our memories and come back to haunt them. They exclaimed that it wasn't as bad as it seemed. The shame of it all has come back to slap them. They don't want to remember what they did to us and the evil they perpetuated as humans on this planet. And the last one that I will do, go back to Africa. Go back to Africa, the white man screamed in my face as if to say, this country belonged only to his race. I would go back, I said to him, if I could only go alone. But I must take you with me. What do you mean, take me with you? I'm already living in my country. All your genes and your DNA must go along with me, as well as your white skin, you know. You cannot imagine how devastated it was for some of us when we discovered we were not white, but Black. Our DNA from the man who caused our conception, even our skin color, indicated that we were white, while the genes of our mothers said we were not. Yes, I would love to go back to the motherland, but I'm afraid you would have to come along. All these genes of yours you have given to us from the pleasures you enjoyed from our Black female bodies from centuries ago must come along as well and spill their deeds upon the land, which most likely will kill us all. Thank you.
Okay, I
This is, oh, sorry.
Hey,
no, go ahead.
Brandon.
How are you? Go ahead. I'll wait till after. Someone else was going to say something.
Oh, no, go ahead. You'd like to say something, Brandon?
Sure. I'm a little nervous. So Marianne will probably appreciate this.
Say it.
Thank you, Marianne, for inviting me. Okay, here we go. Bear with me. I'm gonna be trying to kind of read my own handwriting, which is kind of not the greatest. So, okay. I know things seem bleak. I can't imagine what the world might have been like when you were alive. Due to sacrifices and the trials of people like your ancestors, Black folk will be free from bondage by an amendment to the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, ratified by many people who are the same race of those who put you in bondage. Now, whether or not they actually believe that we should be free from slavery is neither here nor there, but it's still passed. Decades later, there will be a whole bunch of other progresses that you probably wouldn't think of. Some of these will include the fact that we're able to vote now, though there's suppression of the vote that happens on a daily basis. We're able to own property, though due to redlining and things of that nature, our value will never be the same as the white man or woman. We're able to be educated, yet property taxes would make it unequal so that we don't get the same level of education as the white man and woman. And one of us would even become the president of the United States. But then again, some would say that he's half Black and not fully Black. And Lord, we know how much he had to work twice as hard just to get half as far. I know many of your ancestors slaved and fought, especially when they were in high power positions, to make what would be Juneteenth a reality. Juneteenth would be the day that the last slaves would be free from Galveston. Now that's a catch-22, and I won't go into the details of why that's a catch-22, but I think that it should give you hope that even though we will never be as free as the white man and woman, there have been progresses. I think that what you need to know is that if it wasn't for the sacrifices and unfortunately the road that you had to, the life that you had to live, we wouldn't be where we are today. So while we continue to fight for racial equity and equality, we've come a long way. And because of you and your spirit, we keep pressing on.
That was awesome.
Right, Brandon.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yes.
Isom, we only have 7 minutes, so we're gonna have to, I'll let Isom take it to give to Gaylord. Sorry, everyone.
Well, I'll give it to Gaylord, but before we do, I'd like to share just a little bit. This is called When Was It? Was it in 1619 when a ship walked off its gangplank, the very first? Was it in 1776 when our country became a real nation with 13 states? Was it in 1803 at the Mammoth, Louisiana Purchase, adding 3 times to our nation's land? Was it in 1812 when we delivered liberty, fraternity, and equality once again? Was it in 1820 when a compromise pleased Missouri with 3/5? Was it in 1843, 48 when gold rushed folks to the state of California? Was it in 1862 when Lincoln's quill draped ink on the proclamation? Was it in 1865 when General Granger made it to Galveston? No, it was in 19 no, it was in 20, one more time, Isom. No, it was in 1995 when the great state of Mississippi finally signed the 13th Amendment, that the laws of slavery in the US came off the book. Gaylord, please close us out. Thank you.
Wow. I want to thank everyone for attending the African American Writers Alliance. We out here, Emancipation Reflections, reading and writing workshop, and those who participated in the workshop, wrote at home, seasoned writers, and most of all, the new writers. Thank you, Brandon. Please join us at Writers Read, the second Sunday of every month. The next one is July 11th from 2 to 4 p.m. There will be no Writers Read in August. For more information to become a member, visit our website. You are encouraged to donate to our organization to continue supporting writers in our community and creating more events. You are invited to visit the We Are Here event for the 7 p.m. virtual unplugged concert presented by We Are Here. The event takes place today after we are done. Unplugged basically means that it is acoustic music or not heavy instrumentation with unplug or in devices. For anyone unfamiliar with the term unplugged. I'm sorry, but I'm reading from my paper here, and I printed it out, and I had the websites in color, but they didn't come out on my paper. So I'm going to ask for help on the We Are Here site event, and also for the website for African American Writers Alliance. I'm embarrassed, but sorry.
We thank you to Jasmine Scott. Thanks, Gaylord, because Jasmine is helping us this evening with Langston Seattle. And Jasmine is putting the, Jasmine is putting the information in the chat. So check out weoutHereSeattle.com, and our African American Writers Alliance website is AAWA-Seattle. AAWA-Seattle.org. Is that right? Everybody got my back? And you can continue watching on Langston, Facebook, YouTube. And we have 2 minutes left. Gaylord, I thank you. Isom, Jay, Helen, Georgia, Leoma. And with that said, Leoma's going to take us home. And please check out AWA's website. We would love to have you see. This will be posted after Langston posts it, as well as some more of our work and a new video that we've shot about the Emancipation Proclamation. That will be posted on our website too. Leoma James, would you take us home with a piece? And then we're going to be at 6:30. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. I wrote a poem. It's called Dear Grandmother. I've never met either of my grandmothers because my parents were both very much older. So this is to my grandmothers, my ancestors who came before me. Dear grandmother, do you recognize me? Walking tall like nothing ever brought me down, speaking as if no one can tell me to be quiet, calling white men out and not being polite, not bowing my head when I walk past anyone, loving the chocolate skin of my unborn son. Dear grandmother, I know I don't talk to you as much as I should, even though my braids don't show the path to freedom. Just know I'm still following. You're still guiding the trail. I remember all the things that you said, even if I don't hear them, your voice is still in my head. Dear grandmother, I'm so blessed to come from someone as strong as you, bold as you, resilient as you. I just wish you didn't have to. Dear grandmother, I will never understand your sacrifice. Dear grandmother, they told me that Juneteenth is a holiday. It feels so weird celebrating your freedom when we are still locked in our chains. Dear grandmother, it's because of you that I can and you gave your life and they never gave you the land. 40 acres and a mule, I wonder what that is in modern times. The day you get yours is the day I'll get mine. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you,
Right on.
everyone. Thank you. Beautiful,
Have a good
Leoma.
ride
Wonderful way
tomorrow.
to.
Thank you for being a part.
Thanks, Jasmine. And join the 7 o'clock concert. We out here, Seattle.com.